All right, so today we're going to be taking a deep dive into some pretty dark waters.
Okay.
We'll be looking into the life and crimes of Ed Gein.
All right.
And for this one, we've got quite a few different sources.
Okay.
We've got a Wikipedia article, an encyclopedia entry, some pretty in-depth articles about his crimes,
Okay.
and even a psychological profile.
Wow.
So buckle up because this one gets
Yeah.
pretty intense.
I bet.
We're talking murder. And, well, let's just say Gein had a rather unique way of interacting with the human body.
And you know what's really interesting is how his case has had like a lasting impact on our culture.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I mean, it's almost impossible to talk about horror films without mentioning Ed Gein.
Exactly.
Like, think about it. Psycho.
Yeah.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
But
Silence of the Lambs.
all of them.
All have elements that are drawn from his crimes.
Exactly. And that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating to me.
Yeah.
How did this seemingly ordinary guy from rural Wisconsin become this, like, dark inspiration for some of the most iconic horror movies ever made?
It's a great question.
Like, what turns a person into that?
That is the question. And to really get into that, we need to start with his background.
Okay, so his early life.
Yeah, the sources paint a pretty grim picture of his childhood.
Okay, so let's unpack that.
Yeah.
What was his early life like?
Well, his father was an alcoholic and largely absent.
Okay.
While his mother, Augusta, was incredibly domineering and deeply religious, almost fanatical, really, and she instilled a real fear of the world, and especially of women in Ed.
That's some heavy stuff to grow up with.
Yeah.
Especially without a strong counterbalance from his dad?
Yeah, you would think.
Was there anyone else in the picture?
Well, he did have a brother, Henry.
Right.
But his death is a bit of a mystery in itself.
Yeah, I've read about that.
Yeah.
Officially ruled an accident, but there were some inconsistencies. Right.
Right. Some reports mention bruises on Henry's head.
Yeah.
Leading to speculation about Ed's potential involvement, but nothing was ever proven.
Okay.
But after Henry's death, though, Ed became even more isolated, clinging to his mother as his only companion.
It really sounds like a recipe for a very insular worldview.
Oh, for sure.
Especially when you consider what the sources say about Augusta's beliefs.
Right.
That women were basically instruments of the devil.
Exactly. And when she died in 1945, it seems like Ed's already fragile world completely shattered.
Okay.
He boarded up the rooms that she used.
Really?
Essentially creating a shrine to her memory while the rest of the house fell into disrepair.
So he loses the only person that he was truly attached to.
It seems that way.
And he's left alone with his, let's call them unusual interests.
Right.
The sources mention his fascination with macabre subjects.
Yeah.
Like Nazi experiments and cannibalism.
Yeah. It's a fascinating and disturbing mix, isn't it?
Oh, for sure.
It's like his grief combined with this already warped worldview started to curdle into something truly dangerous.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting is how these interests like manifested in his actions.
Okay.
He wasn't just reading about these gruesome things. He was actively seeking them out in a very hands-on way.
Okay. You're going to have to elaborate on that.
Yeah.
When exactly did this fascination with the macabre cross the line into an actual crime?
Well, his first confirmed victim was Mary Hogan.
Okay.
She was a tavern owner who disappeared in 1954.
Okay.
She vanished without a trace. And while Gein wasn't immediately a suspect, her disappearance would later become a key piece of the puzzle.
Okay, and this all came to a head with the disappearance of Bernice Worden in 1957.
Right. Exactly. The case that really blew the lid off of everything.
Right, and this is where the story takes that truly horrific turn.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just that she was missing, it was what they found at Gein's farmhouse.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
So
creepy.
Good. Her son, Frank Worden, was a deputy sheriff and immediately suspected Gein.
Oh, wow.
And when the police arrived at the farm, they weren't prepared for what they encountered.
Oh, my gosh.
It was like walking into a nightmare.
So walk us through it. What exactly did they find?
Well, for starters, they found Bernice Worden's body in the shed.
Okay.
But that was just the beginning.
Oh, no.
The real horror was inside the house.
Okay.
They found human skulls on his bedposts.
Oh, my gosh.
Bowls made from human skulls.
No.
A chair upholstered in human skin.
It's almost impossible to fathom.
I know.
It's like something straight out of a horror movie.
It is, except it was all too real.
Right.
And remember, he didn't just kill these people.
Yeah.
He repurposed them. There was a lampshade made of human skin.
Oh, gosh.
A belt fashioned from nipples, and even a woman's suit.
Wait, a woman's suit?
Yes.
That's beyond disturbing.
Yeah.
What was his explanation for that?
Well, this is where the psychological aspect gets even more fascinating.
Okay.
During questioning, Gein admitted to robbing graves for years.
What?
Amassing this collection of human remains.
Oh, my God.
He claimed he wanted to wear the woman's suit to become his mother.
So is this where the Oedipal complex comes in?
Mm-hmm.
That unhealthy attachment to his mother?
It's certainly a possible interpretation.
Yeah.
Gein clearly had a deeply disturbed relationship with his mother.
Right.
And his actions suggest a twisted desire to somehow embody her.
Wow.
But the woman's suit also raises a lot of other questions.
Okay.
Was he driven purely by this Oedipal desire?
Right.
Or was there something more at play, something even darker?
Oh, gosh.
We know he confessed to killing Warden and Hogan.
Yeah.
But what about the rest of the remains?
Right.
Did he really get all of them from graveyards, as he claimed?
He was suspected in other disappearances, right?
Yeah.
Could there have been more victims than he admitted to?
That's a question that still haunts this case. It's entirely possible that he downplayed the extent of his crimes, fearing even greater consequences.
That's a chilling thought.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder what was going through his mind as he was creating these horrific objects.
Right.
What was he trying to achieve?
Well, that's what we're going to explore next.
Okay.
Because to truly understand Ed Gein, we need to go beyond the surface, beyond the shock value, and delve into the psychology behind his actions.
Okay, so let's dive in, because this is where it gets really interesting and disturbing.
Buckle up.
So we've established that Ed Gein was a deeply disturbed individual.
Yeah.
But what happened after his arrest? Did he ever face justice for his crimes?
Well, that's where the story takes another interesting turn.
Okay.
In 1957, shortly after his arrest, he was deemed unfit to stand trial.
Unfit to stand trial. What does that even mean?
It means that due to his mental state, he was considered incapable of understanding the charges against him or assisting in his own defense.
Okay.
He was diagnosed with schizophrenia and committed to the Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane.
So instead of a courtroom, he ended up in a mental institution.
Exactly.
Wow.
He spent a decade there receiving treatment and evaluation.
Okay.
It wasn't until 1968 that doctors determined that he was competent enough to participate in his own defense.
Wow. So 10 years after those gruesome discoveries at his farmhouse, Ed Gein finally went on trial.
That's right. And the trial itself was pretty short.
Oh, wow.
It only lasted a week.
Okay.
And it was held without a jury.
Really?
At the request of his defense team.
Interesting.
So the judge heard the evidence and ultimately found Gein guilty of first-degree murder for the death of Bernice Warden.
But I thought you said he confessed to 2 murders.
You're right, he did.
What about Mary Hogan?
You're right, he did confess to both.
Yeah.
But the state decided to only pursue charges for Warden's murder.
Okay.
And there are a few possible reasons for this. Some speculate that they didn't want to put the families through the trauma of another trial, especially given Gein's mental state.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Others believe that with a guilty verdict already secured,
Right.
a second trial was deemed unnecessary and potentially costly.
It does seem a bit odd, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
He confesses to 2 murders, but only faces trial for 1.
It definitely adds another layer of complexity to this already bizarre case.
Yeah. Okay.
But ultimately, even though he was found guilty of murder, he wasn't sent to prison.
Wait, really? Why not?
Because he was found not guilty by reason of insanity.
Oh, wow.
So the court acknowledged his guilt in Warden's murder, but recognized that due to his mental illness, he wasn't fully responsible for his actions at the time of the crime.
Okay.
So instead of prison, he was sent back to a mental health facility.
Okay.
This time, the Mendota State Hospital in Madison, Wisconsin.
So despite the horrifying nature of his crimes,
Right.
Ed Gein never served any time in an actual prison.
That's correct.
Wow.
He lived out the rest of his days at Mendota, dying there in 1984 from respiratory failure due to lung cancer.
Okay, so what about the infamous farmhouse?
Yeah.
I mean, that place must have become some kind of morbid tourist attraction.
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
It was actually scheduled to be auctioned off along with all of Gein's possessions.
Oh, wow.
But just a few days before the auction,
Yeah.
the farmhouse mysteriously burned down.
Arson, I'm assuming.
That was the suspicion.
Yeah.
But the official cause was never determined.
Okay.
Some believe it was locals who wanted to just erase this dark chapter from their town's history.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Who would want to be reminded of those horrors on a daily basis?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's understandable.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of symbolic, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
This physical manifestation of his crimes going up in flames.
Definitely. And what's even more interesting is Gein's reaction when he heard about the fire.
What was it?
He simply shrugged and said, "Just as well." It's almost as if he was relieved to have that tangible connection to his past destroyed.
It's chilling.
Yeah.
Almost like he recognized the power that those objects held.
Yeah.
The darkness they represented.
Right.
But even though the farmhouse is gone, the story of Ed Gein lives on.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
And not just in local folklore or true crime documentaries.
Yeah.
His case had a profound impact on popular culture.
Right.
Inspiring countless books, films, and even music.
Yeah, we mentioned it earlier, but let's really dig into that.
Okay.
How did the Ed Gein case specifically influence movies like Psycho,
Yeah.
the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and the Silence of the Lambs?
Right.
What elements of his story resonated with filmmakers?
Well, each film draws inspiration from Gein in different ways.
Okay.
For instance, Norman Bates in Psycho shares some clear parallels with Gein.
Okay.
The isolated farmhouse, the overbearing mother figure,
Right.
the blurring of reality and delusion.
And then there's Leatherface in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. His whole aesthetic, the mask made of human skin,
Yeah.
that's straight out of Gein's playbook, isn't it?
Absolutely. The film even opens with a disclaimer suggesting it's based on true events.
Oh, wow.
Further solidifying the connection in the viewer's mind.
Right.
And while the Texas Chainsaw Massacre amplifies the gore and the violence,
Yeah.
it taps into that same primal fear that Gein's case evokes.
Right.
The fear of the seemingly ordinary person who harbors dark, unspeakable secrets.
And what about the Silence of the Lambs?
Yeah.
How does Buffalo Bill fit into this?
Well, think about Buffalo Bill's motivation. His desire to create a woman's suit from his victim's skin.
Yeah.
It directly mirrors Gein's own twisted desire to transform himself to literally wear the skin of others.
Wow.
But The Silence of the Lambs takes it a step further,
Okay.
exploring themes of gender identity and transformation
Right.
in a way that's both disturbing and thought-provoking.
It's amazing how these films take fragments of Gein's story and weave them into these complex, terrifying narratives. It speaks to the enduring power of his case.
Yeah.
How it continues to resonate with audiences and inspire creative interpretations.
It really does. But it's not just about the shock value or the gruesome details.
Okay.
I think there's something deeper at play here, something about the human condition.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
What are you getting at? What's the bigger picture here?
Yeah.
Well, I think it comes back to that initial question we posed, like what creates a figure like Ed Gein?
Yeah.
On the surface, it's easy to dismiss him as a monster.
Right.
Just a one-dimensional boogeyman.
Right.
But when you delve deeper into his story, you start to see the complexities.
Yeah.
All the factors that contributed to his descent into darkness.
Exactly. And his case really forces us to think about that whole nature versus nurture debate. How much of who we are is determined by our genes.
Yeah.
And how much is shaped by our experiences.
Well, Gein's childhood was clearly traumatic.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the domineering religious mother,
Right.
the absent father, the isolation.
Yeah, it's like all those elements
Yeah.
created a pressure cooker that eventually exploded in
Right.
this horrific way.
And that's where the nurture part comes in.
Yeah.
We can't ignore the impact of his upbringing.
Right.
You know, the unhealthy attachment to his mother,
Yeah.
the warped worldview he developed.
Sure.
But we also can't ignore the potential role of mental illness.
Right.
His diagnosis of schizophrenia suggests that there were underlying biological factors at play as well.
It's not a simple answer, is it?
Not at all.
It's this complex interplay of nature and nurture,
Right.
biology and environment that ultimately shaped who he became.
And I think that's why his story continues to fascinate us.
Yeah.
It challenges our simplistic notions of good and evil.
Right.
It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth
Yeah.
that even the most horrific acts are often the result of a complex web of factors.
Exactly. And that's, I think, why these deep dives are so valuable.
Yeah, for sure.
They allow us to explore these complex issues in a safe space, to grapple with uncomfortable truths without shying away from them.
It's not just about understanding the past, is it?
No, it's not.
There are lessons we can learn from Gein's case that have implications for the present,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
for how we approach mental health, criminal justice,
Right.
and even our consumption of media.
Absolutely, on like a practical level.
Yeah.
Gein's case highlights the need for early intervention and support for individuals struggling with mental illness.
Right?
You know, if he had received proper treatment, perhaps his story would have had a different ending.
Yeah, it also raises questions about how we deal with individuals who commit crimes while suffering from severe mental illness.
Yeah.
The not guilty by reason of insanity verdict is a tricky one.
It is.
It acknowledges that the individual may not have been fully in control of their actions, but it also raises concerns about accountability and public safety.
Right. There's no easy answer.
No.
It's a delicate balance between recognizing the diminished capacity of the individual while still ensuring the safety of society.
Yeah.
And it's a conversation we need to continue having as a society.
And then there's the whole cultural impact.
Yeah.
The way Gein's story has been reinterpreted and reimagined in movies, books, and music.
Right.
It makes you think about the power of storytelling.
Yeah.
How we use fiction to explore our darkest fears and grapple with uncomfortable truths.
Horror, in particular, has this unique ability to tap into our primal anxieties, to expose the darkness that lurks beneath the surface of everyday life.
For sure.
In Gein's case, with its gruesome details and psychological complexity, has provided this fertile ground for horror creators to explore those themes.
But it's important to remember that these fictional portrayals, while often inspired by real events, are ultimately works of imagination.
Exactly.
We need to be critical consumers of media, recognizing that these stories often amplify and distort reality for dramatic effect.
The real Ed Gein was a complex, troubled individual whose story is both fascinating and disturbing, but he was also a human being, not a monster from a horror movie. And I think it's crucial to keep that in mind as we continue to explore his case and its legacy.
So, what can we take away from all this? What's the big takeaway for our listeners? The folks who, like us, are drawn to these deep dives into the darker corners of history.
I think the most important takeaway is the need for nuance, for critical thinking. Don't just accept the sensationalized headlines or the simplified narratives. Dig deeper, ask questions, challenge your own assumptions.
And remember that even the most seemingly monstrous acts are often the result of a complex interplay of factors. Understanding those factors doesn't excuse the behavior, but it does offer a more complete, more human perspective.
Exactly. It's about moving beyond the simplistic labels of good and evil and recognizing the shades of gray that exist within us all.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. And it's definitely given us a lot to think about. The story of Ed Gein is a dark one.
It is.
But it's also a fascinating glimpse into the complexities of human nature, the forces that shape us, and the enduring power of our darkest fears.
And as always, we encourage you to continue exploring this topic on your own. Read the sources we mentioned, delve deeper into the psychology of crime, and critically examine the ways in which Gein's case continues to be interpreted and reimagined in popular culture.
Because that's what the deep dive is all about. Sparking curiosity, encouraging critical thinking, and hopefully leaving you with more questions than answers.
Exactly.
So until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
See ya!